How do pilots land when they can't see a thing? Most of us imagine a captain leaning forward, squinting through a white blanket, hoping the runway will magically appear. The truth is far more precise and far less dramatic. When visibility drops below what the human eye can handle, pilots switch from outside looking to inside looking. Their cockpit becomes a high-tech control room, and the aircraft follows invisible signals that guide it safely to the ground. The star of that system is the Instrument Landing System, or ILS. Think of it like a GPS for the runway. Two radio beams, one aligned with the center line of the runway, the other tilted up at a gentle angle, create a three-dimensional corridor. The aircraft's instruments read these beams, telling the pilots exactly where they are left, right, and high-low, even if the world outside is a uniform gray. On the ground, a beacon at the runway's end sends a steady localizer signal that the plane follows like a train on a track. At the same time, a glide slope transmitter projects an upward tilted signal that tells the aircraft the perfect descent angle, usually around 3 degrees. The cockpit's display shows a small ball that the pilots keep centered. If it drifts, they adjust the controls until it snaps back. Modern airliners also have an autopilot that can lock onto those signals and fly the approach automatically, while the crew monitors everything. If the ILS isn't available, they have backup procedures using satellite navigation, radar vectors, or even a visual approach once the runway finally becomes visible. All of this happens in seconds, with multiple layers of redundancy, and the pilots are trained to trust the instruments more than their eyes in low visibility conditions. That's why you'll hear the calm, "We have the runway in sight," even when the world outside looks like a foggy kitchen. So, pilots don't need to see the runway. They need to listen to the invisible guidance that tells them exactly where it is. If you ever wonder how a plane finds the ground in thick fog, remember it's a precise dance of radio beams and skilled eyes on the instruments. If you found that helpful, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes flight facts. When the fog rolls in, it's not just a little hazy. Visibility can drop to literally a few meters. Imagine trying to drive down a highway at 100 kilometers an hour, only being able to see as far as your car's hood. That's essentially what a pilot faces in dense fog, making a visual landing utterly impossible. So what do? They switch from seeing the runway with their eyes to listening to it with their instruments. This is where the Instrument Landing System, or ILS, becomes their best friend. Think of the ILS as an invisible runway made of radio signals. Special transmitters on the ground near the airport send out two precise radio beams. One beam tells the plane if it's too far left or right of the runway centerline. The other beam tells it if it's too high or too low on its descent path. These aren't just vague signals. They are incredibly precise, creating a narrow corridor in the sky. The aircraft's computers pick up these signals and then translate them into clear, easy-to-read guides on the pilot's display. It's like having a virtual, perfectly aligned path drawn right in front of them, even when they can't see a thing outside the window. So, how do pilots actually use those invisible signals to find the runway in the thickest fog? It all comes down to a system called the Instrument Landing System, or ILS. Think of the ILS as creating an invisible, precision-guided railroad track of radio waves leading right to the runway. This invisible track has two parts, each doing a very specific job. First, there's the localizer. This signal comes from an antenna array at the far end of the runway, past where the planes touch down. It sends out two distinct radio beams, one slightly to the left of the runway centerline and one slightly to the right. The aircraft's instruments listen to both. If the plane hears more of the left beam, it knows it's drifted too far right. If it hears more of the right beam, it's too far left. The pilot's display shows a needle or a diamond that moves, guiding them to keep the aircraft perfectly centered left to right on the runway centerline. It's like having an invisible laser pointer showing you exactly where the middle of the road is, even if you can't see the road itself. The second part is the glide slope. This signal comes from antennas located to the side of the runway, usually about 1,000 feet from the approach end. Just like the localizer, it sends out two beams, one slightly above the ideal descent path and one slightly below. By comparing these two signals, the aircraft's instruments tell the pilot if they're too high, too low, or perfectly on the correct angle of descent. This is crucial because landing isn't just about lining up with the runway. It's also about coming down at the right, steady angle. Together, the localizer and glide slope create that precise, invisible path, a radio-guided rail, that keeps the plane perfectly aligned both horizontally and vertically. So, how do pilots actually use those invisible radio beams? Inside the cockpit, the primary flight display shows two intersecting lines, often called needles. One moves left and right, showing if the plane is drifting off the runway centerline. The other moves up and down, indicating if the plane is too high or too low on the correct glide path. The pilot's job is to keep those needles perfectly centered, guiding the aircraft down. Here's where it gets clever. The autopilot can actually lock on to these ILS signals. Think of it like a smart cruise control for landing. It automatically makes the small, precise adjustments needed to keep those needles centered, even in thick fog. But even with the autopilot flying, the pilot is always monitoring, ready to take over. They're also watching a crucial number on their instruments, the decision altitude. This isn't just an arbitrary height. It's a preset altitude, unique to each runway and approach, where the pilot must be able to clearly see the runway environment. If, at that specific altitude, the runway isn't in sight, the pilot doesn't hesitate. They simply perform a go-around, adding power and climbing back up for another attempt. It's a non-negotiable safety rule, ensuring that every landing has a visual confirmation before the final touchdown. What happens if the airport's ILS system isn't working, or a smaller airport doesn't even have one? That's where backup systems come in, adding even more layers of safety. Modern aircraft aren't just relying on one type of signal. Many airports now use approaches based on GPS, called RNAV approaches. Think of it like this. If ILS is a very precise radio beam painted on the runway, an RNAV approach uses the incredible accuracy of GPS satellites to guide the plane along a virtual path in the sky, leading right to the runway. It gives the pilots the exact same kind of precise vertical and horizontal guidance on their cockpit displays, just from a different source. And here's another crucial layer. Air traffic controllers are always watching. They have sophisticated radar systems that show them the exact position of every aircraft, even in dense fog. They're constantly monitoring the plane's progress, altitude, and speed, comparing it to the intended flight path. If an aircraft deviates too much, or if there's any concern, they can immediately warn the pilots or even instruct them to go around. So, even if the primary guidance system has an issue, there are always human eyes and advanced radar keeping watch, ensuring a safe approach. So, how do pilots land when they can't see the runway? It's not magic, and it's certainly not guesswork. They do it by trusting incredibly precise radio and satellite guidance systems. These systems essentially create an invisible tunnel in the sky, leading the aircraft right down to the runway threshold. Think of it like a very advanced bowling alley. The plane is the ball, and the guidance systems are the bumpers, keeping it perfectly centered and on the right path, even if the lane is completely obscured. Modern aircraft are equipped with technology that can interpret these signals and even fly the approach and landing almost entirely automatically. The pilot is still very much in charge, monitoring every step, ready to intervene, but the plane's advanced autopilot can execute the fine adjustments needed for a perfect touchdown. The reassuring truth is, flying in fog, while it might feel a little eerie as a passenger, is just another Tuesday for pilots and air traffic control. The procedures are rigorous, the equipment is incredibly reliable, and there are multiple layers of backup. So, the next time you're looking out the window at a thick blanket of clouds during a descent, you can be confident that the flight deck has a crystal clear picture of exactly where you are and where you're going. Pilots land in fog just as safely and reliably as they do on a clear, sunny day, thanks to amazing technology and meticulous training. If you enjoyed clearing up this myth and now feel a little more confident about those misty landings, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button for more behind-the-scenes flight facts.